Hey, I am Angie Penn. I'm the co-founder and CMO of the Knowledge Exchange, and I'm a Fredericksburg local. Been here all my life. Can't probably meet a lot of people who are from Fredericksburg and been here all their lives. But it's a good place, good area, great area that needs a lot of help and a lot of growth. So my background, I work in as a behavior therapist, working kids with special needs, kids with autism primarily. And I have an education background where I worked as a para, behavior support primarily for about 4 years. And got involved with TKE because Jimmy told me about it last year, and just said, "Hey, I have this idea. Is it stupid?" And I was like, "No, let's do it." And so we just kind of took it off from there. And yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
Is that how you rope her
But
into everything?
yeah, pretty much. I have a lot of ideas running in my head, and sometimes they pan out, sometimes they don't, and it's good to have a second opinion. So, Angie's opinion is always definitely respected. And if you say stupid, then you better bet it's pretty stupid.
I'll say it. I won't even hesitate.
Absolutely. So, Kiki is going to be one of those ideas, and it makes sense in my head, and it makes sense in her head. So, you know what? I'm gonna find this company. So, a little, really over, about to be over a year now. Here we are. But yeah, just a little bit going over myself. My name is Jimmy. I am the founder and chief executive of the Knowledge Exchange. Going over the background of the organization, I've been probably tutoring ever since I was essentially uh, doing my bachelor's at University of Virginia, up until really now, so 8 years now. Um, and what I realized is that, well, quite frankly, tutoring is just too expensive to the point where you look at today's prices. Some of the biggest competitors, they're charging $50 to $99 an hour based on what subject you do, and individual tutors are not that much better for profit ones, going to 25, 30, $35 an hour plus. And the price will get much worse depending on if you're near a city center or not. And it doesn't seem like it'll go down anytime soon. So from my experience of partly tutoring, also volunteering, helping students, is that the growing trend, it was unmistakable. And the trend was essentially students that did require tutoring, that really were desperately needing tutoring, are the ones that couldn't get it. Quite frankly, on no fault of their own. It's just that there were, in an unfortunate circumstance, that they were born in a family that just couldn't financially afford a tutoring. While kids that could afford tutoring, not a lot of times over, they are already just good to go. They're at a straight A students or close enough, and their parents, are from families that can't afford tutoring, can't afford $50 to $90 an hour. And it was just this gross imbalance that I couldn't really tolerate. And she can tell you a lot that sometimes when I see something that's, just outright unfair, it just gets my blood boiling.
Call it righteous anger.
Righteous anger, and I call it getting stuff done. And sometimes emotions, even anger, like it feels you and it pushes you to do action, positive or bad, negative action. And TK is one of those positive action, going from obviously gross injustice of education equality that's growing harder. I mean, this inequality, the gap is growing wider and wider year by year. And I just saw it and I was like, well, I'm just gonna start fixing it. And I started a nonprofit. We started with 4 people, and now we're over 50. So an increase of more than tenfold. So the growth has been exponential. Has been mind blowing. But it's from my belief ever since the beginning that in the end of the day, if you're genuine, what you're doing and what you're doing, truly benefits your community, then you'll get rewarded justly. It's just a matter of time. The community can recognize that and they'll treat you accordingly. That's a belief I held since day one, and our growth and our popularity is just testament of that belief, in my opinion. So
Wow.
that's who we are, and that's how our origin is essentially.
That's amazing. Yeah, I don't even need to maybe introduce anymore what the TKE is about after that speak from Jimmy and Angie here. Just to kind of give a little bit of background to everyone, as we're like a nonprofit for impact organization that wants to provide education, being a right and equality. And Jimmy has put it together to actually make it easily where you can have tutoring sessions to have an equal playing field in terms of education. I know in personally my involvement, so just kind of getting to see you guys grow from last year, especially during like an unprecedented time of a pandemic with COVID going on, and coming back to that righteous anger also. I mean, like revolutions and changes happen during typically when you're in teenage years. That's just kind of seen throughout history. So, I mean, I'm kind of seeing that's what's been going on in the last in just the year of 2020. That a lot of changes has been made, a lot of movement has been moving forward, and since actually I kind of believe, or I agree with you at the same time, where if you put good out into the world, only good can come back into you, kind of like the threefold rule I kind of believe in. And also in, like, if you talk about business, talk about life, relationships. So just to kind of get a little bit about TKE, because I've seen you guys growing, like I said, when you guys were first starting a year ago, and just so you're over like 50 plus tutors. I think you're now actually like you're much better funded even just from a year from your growth as a nonprofit. Um, what the kind of like talk me through like why TKE specifically? Like you said that you were doing tutoring. Is that what you just saw? And you said that you started off in the Fredericksburg area. You just wanted to, like, one day you just started a nonprofit with Angie and just kind of rolled with it.
So the clear statistics behind this is, well, blurry because there's not any definitive measurement of this, but ballparking in general. I realized, well, the fact that there's essentially no entity that's like ours in the for and surrounding areas. And number two is that, well, statistics, the numbers don't lie, is that most get it wrong. I just felt like I believe in the mission strong enough, and I have people around me that also believe in the mission strong enough and are competent that we're not going to be another of the statistics. And that's why I feel like we're different. We realize the people that had what was done before us or was tried and done before us and failed, and where to go from there. So we know exactly what to aim for and what not to aim for going forward as an organization.
Awesome. Yeah, I think there's, and then going through like TK and your experience, like talk to me about some of like the milestones in the history of TKE. I mean, I came in like when you guys were just doing some volunteer work at locally before the start of COVID, and then over the months you guys were growing, you guys were receiving requests. In fact, to the point where I think you're at a bottleneck now where you actually need more support to handle the amount of people you want to assist, to tutor, to provide for.
Yeah, so like this is Angie speaking. So just where we started, we literally started with only 4 people, and Jimmy just reached out to a couple of friends, a family, just saying, hey, we started a nonprofit providing free tutoring. That's what we started with. And just because we're so new, we were just kind of testing the water, seeing if anybody would even like our idea, essentially. So Jimmy was just starting tutoring, just him, and he just did in-person tutoring for a little bit, and then COVID hit. And that was kind of like the unfortunate but fortunate thing for us, because it opened up like the whole nation for us, that we saw it more than just like a small little nonprofit that we could do in Fredericksburg, but something that we could do nationwide. So around, April timeframe when we like officially got started, we opened it up, we started doing like recruiting websites to get more virtual tutors, opened up for families all across the nations, and that's where we kind of blew up from there. And we got a lot of our vital tutors during that time when we tapped into the virtual world and providing virtual tutoring. And then we just acquired, just because we were just gaining traction, getting awareness, just being relevant, talking about things that are relevant, not just like academic stuff, but just talking about the current climate when it came to the social injustices, with Black Lives Matter movement and all that stuff. And we acquired, a partnership with Black Lives Matter Fredericksburg, where they sponsored 11 students for us, as well as St. George. We had connections there, and so they recognized what we were doing and partnered up with us for a women's education program, sponsoring young women in the area. And we have like a tutoring partnership with an organization or a student initiative in California called Arch Tutoring, and they have provided us so many other tutors that want to get experience, want to get back. And so it's just like a progression that all of a sudden just exploded during COVID, because people realize that, their child isn't getting the support they need because of school and the uncertainty of going in, going out, not knowing what's happening. Like our COO, Kelly, as you know, she's a teacher and she saw it firsthand. And so we were able to provide that additional support to some of her students, some families that we knew. students that we never have ever met and maybe never will meet in person because they're on other parts of the country. And, you know, just acquiring more partnerships and just letting people know what we're doing. And UMW has worked with us too. So we've acquired a lot of tutors from them just because Leslie Martin believes in what we're doing and she wants to help us and help their students, work with worthwhile organizations and give us the time of day, which we're forever thankful for. So we're still growing and we have big goals for 2021. We want to pay our people. That's our biggest milestone we want to hit. We want to pay people a good wage and give them benefits even too, because people don't get paid enough around here. And people shouldn't have to commute or have to work multiple jobs if they're a teacher to be able to make ends meet. So that's our biggest milestone that we haven't hit yet, but we're going to hit it because we've hit all these other milestones without even realizing it. So yeah.
Wow, that's that's a great kind of run through. Yeah, because I've seen you guys grown so much from fundraising, from reaching out to students all across. I mean, tutoring is, most people would think like tutoring is just you sit down with someone, you go over some material, and maybe you understand a thing or two. But for me personally, from seeing you guys go through some of the tutoring sessions, some of the webinars and canvases, I kind of see that there was like something more kind of given. Like just recently, you actually, in fact, just a highlight for Jimmy was that you were going through, I believe, was like a governor program. Not only were you like tutoring them, but you were also mentoring them as well. And could you kind of like elaborate more on that? Because I want to impart on how TK not just a tutoring, but we're also offering guidance throughout these COVID, living at home, just kind of navigating through life, not just because we have like some STEM subjects that you can learn, but also some real applicable skills of living life.
Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, essentially, we are not just K for 12 academic tutoring, like you mentioned before. The way we see effective learning, it has to be holistic. So a lot of times what we found from personal experience with our organization is that these students, they learn so much better if they approach it not just in academics, but the fact of just mentoring. They like their tutors, they trust their tutor, and they learn based on their own style of learning. We never teach by the test. We never strictly teach only by the book. It's a comprehensive learning experience. This is how we see it. And the way we found out is that, well, it's more of a mix of everything. Academic tutoring is there, mentoring is there, just overall experience of, hey, here's someone that's going to work with you out of all, the current challenges you're going through. And feel free to use us whenever you utilize us as a service as much as you can. And that's not just going toward the student, but the parent as well, because like you mentioned before, this last year plus has been extremely difficult for many people. And what we found out is, well, a lot of times parents just glad to have someone else there to help their child, not just academically, but just someone else there to be with the child. Can actively engage with them in mentoring and just talking, and just having another person there that's actively looking out for the well-being of the child. And I can't tell you how many times parents are so grateful for that. A good report card is always a plus, but at the end of the day, you have someone there to genuinely try to help their student and the overall family. We have gotten so much support and so many appreciative gestures from the family saying thank you for that, especially through a rough time, uncertain times like what we have in COVID. So absolutely, with a lot of different programs, we always encourage a holistic approach for our tutors. So the way I picture it is that think of like a academic focused mentor program. It's also kind of how we approach tutoring these days, because like I mentioned before, we recognize and we firmly believe the idea that one of the biggest problem with kids not learning is because we're too rigid. A lot of our school systems, not just anyone in particular in Virginia, but really overall in this country, it's just a systematic problem. The principal needs a certain set of numbers to present, and you to report to the board. So the principal is put pressure on the teachers, had to report to the principal based on the test results because that's the most convenient metric. So they put pressure on the student. So what does that mean? It means that this common trope that we hear time and again will not go away, and that is teachers have systematically been pressured to teach by the test, by the book. It's because at the end of the day, that's the most convenient metric still for school systems. And as a result, the school system is still super rigid and unforgiving and uncompromising. And that's what we found out, especially, more at-risk students. That's the biggest problem. It's not because they're incapable of learning or the bad students. It's because that current system will not be flexible towards these particular students. And that's our model. Be flexible, be autonomous, learn from the way the student likes to learn, and go from there.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, if I had a school like this back in the day, it would be totally different. Just to kind of elaborate and kind of connect to that, because for me growing up in middle school and high school, and just to kind of put it out there, like with a Chinese background in Asian culture, I mean, if you were talking about a degree or career in life, it's either doctor, lawyer, engineer, those three. Anything else is kind of hogwash to them, and depending on if your family is very rigid in that sense. But to actually have a system like I said, I grew up learning with different mentoring skills, different life skills over life, and meeting the different kind of people who were also supportive showed me that there was definitely much more to life than just like being a test or a number. Rather, being actually seeing different behaviors, focusing on improvements. That's kind of what I saw with the TKE, is that you guys were metric on actual like lifelong skills. Nothing like a quick turnaround of regurgitating facts. It was about like how to get them self-sustaining, get them up on their feet, and then develop them with the tools they can handle whatever comes their way in life. So that's kind of amazing that you guys have that same philosophy brought out throughout all of TKE. And then, like from that, I know that your background was actually a little bit of like in finance as well. So now that you're seeing this disparity in terms of like the education system and how it's being rigid, even you in your life just kind of growing up and growing like financial, like what are you kind of seeing in the youth that you want to actually pay forward? I mean, you're setting them up with education, you're setting up with like kind of skill sets through the mentoring. Um, is that kind of part of like what you want to set them up? Is that what you're trying to bring out from TKE and bring out like the next generation that we believe in?
Yeah, absolutely. Because in the day, I mean, you heard this model so many times. You, me, everyone. It's that, oh, everything I learned in high school, everything I learned in college, I barely used it. And guess what? It's the truth. Even in college, about like, let's be honest, 5%. I was a math major. 5% for me at least is really practical and work experience. 95% completely off the rule. You think writing proofs all day is gonna, your boss doesn't care about that? No, for me at least, it's like Excel sheets. Can you use R, SQL, MATLAB well? That's it. So, what does that mean? So, does that mean academics is worthless? No, obviously not. It's still a good mental practice. It's like what I tell my students, like going to the gym. It's like run a marathon essentially, exercising. It's like once you can prove that you can achieve this task that not many people can achieve, graduating from college, so for example, you show that I went through the ringer and I came out, I accomplished this task. So it's like your first task accomplished essentially, and to show that you have you have what it takes to tough it out. So what does last is the habits. So if that's something that's fundamental, and it's all outright universal towards anything you want to accomplish in the future for students. So good habits, actually enjoying what they're learning, why they're learning it, and just overall build that this idea that learning doesn't have to be some kind of thing you like despise, like cleaning the dishes. So forming good habits, forming practical knowledge. That's what I found out. Is really the key to success for the future generation, like you mentioned before. So, you mentioned before what other programs you offer that's not just related to academic. You also have a really strong emphasis towards practical knowledge, practical workshops going forward. So, from my financial background, I also have a lot of personal. We hosted personal finance seminars, essentially telling people what they should have probably all, any day of the week at high school, but they don't. Essentially, how to do the taxes. What's the most common deductions that people can have that qualify for they don't even know they qualify for? What's the IRA, individual retirement account? What are some basic investment strategies? Like value investing, momentum investing, that kind of stuff. Real tangible results that learning, some random algebraic theory or writing a million proofs is not, that won't have the similar outcome. So practicality is my word essentially for what really is the theme towards success.
And then to kind of turn towards like Angie, I mean, you also went through like I said you were a teacher for like special needs. How did you feel like within the system? I mean, being part of it, what were you seeing that were lacking? What were you seeing that were doing good? Because that's kind of seems like to be your champion part and part of the TKE is actually making sure that there's quality given to each of our students and during the tutoring sessions and just even within our staff that there's a same vision, a same like mindset, and the same kind of heart in terms of doing all of this.
I said earlier, I do have a background in education, and yeah, I do have a background in education. I worked in 2 different school counties in this area for a total of 4 years, and I worked in like alternative school. So the kids are like, this is like their last chance. They didn't, either fit in or they couldn't support them, or their behaviors were so high risk that they just couldn't be in their base school. And so, you would think it would be more individualized, which it was. It was really catered to the kids, individual education plan, which is the IEP. It was based off of their BIP, was a behavioral plan that just is response to their behaviors and such. And, you would think it'd be more individualized, but at the same time, there's still teachers who, their principals give them, certain leeway or certain expectations for them on a yearly basis, and they still get funding from the county for certain things, just like every other public school in the school counties. So they still had to teach to a test. We still had to do some type of test every year that we had to show that we were teaching them, quote unquote, these subjects and these material that they didn't really need to learn. We had students who, they're 13 years old, 14 years old, and mentally they're like 8, and they can't even wipe their own bottom. They can't even tie their own shoes. And so we're focusing more, we would take this time, like vital time that we could take to teach them these skills and taking it to see if they knew who George Washington was, or, oh, where was this country or whatever. And I'm like, these kids don't even need to know this right now. Like they should have learned this years ago, but they didn't because of their behaviors. Let's focus on that, And I just got frustrated with working in that field and having to waste my time with this. And I was working towards becoming a special education teacher, and I stopped because I was just like, I would go crazy. I already worked there 4 years in the school counties. I'm like, I can't do another 5, 6, 20 years. I'm like, no. So I moved over to behavior like ABA instead, because that's focused more on the individual, working on those life skills, the language, all those things that were gaps that weren't filled in the school. And the schools can only do so much because you're in the classroom for 6.5, 7 hours. So the teachers only do so much. But, the parents don't get the proper support or get the proper, wage. Same with the teachers. It's all, everybody's getting like lack of resources, lack of support. So it's not a surprise when the students suffer, and they're already suffering because they're basically going to be out of school and just going to be stuck, So that was like the big motivator for me, that, I want to do something about it. And even if I wasn't working directly in the schools like I wanted to have some type of individual impact and like provide that, that spin, that perspective that wasn't seen elsewhere.
Listen to you guys talk. You guys are speaking your words. You can definitely feel their passion over like what TKEs has come about, and I'm glad I had the fortune to actually kind of help highlight more of the people behind the cause for TKE. And so just to kind of wind down, because as all of our audience may not know, secretly they're outside in the cold, huddled together, trying to actually taking the time and to actually speak with us and talk about what TKE is all about. So what are like your guys' goals in the future for TKE? I know that we're trying to develop some brand awareness. I know we're actually working on developing consistent funding through either our Patreon. If you guys haven't checked out our Patreon at patreon.com/TKE nonprofit. What are your like future goals? Because even having livable wages, you guys are so heavily active in politics and just wanting to actually raise awareness and being part of a community versus being actively part of a community. What do you guys see TKE being in the future?
The big thing, like you said, we want to pay people a livable, good wage so they don't have to work multiple jobs and have to struggle, essentially. But we want to have an office space so we can have sessions in person in our own location, have events and things of that nature. Continue to build up our community connections and continue to partner up with individuals in our community that believe in what we do, that specialize in different things that we can maximize on our efforts. Because as the saying goes, it takes a village to raise a child, and that's something I take to heart really. And just kind of seeing where it goes from there. Like our expectation of this organization in not even a year, like it far exceeded what we've expected it to be at this point. So the sky's the limit, really. And once we acquire like these good partnerships with the school systems, and because we have talks with Stafford Middle and things like that, that we really see that we really are going to start making more of that impact that we want to make. Not just in Fredericksburg, but in the whole nation, really. Because if we can have impact here, why not everywhere else?
Any words on your end, Jimmy, in terms of you're like the captain of the ship, kind of steering us to the future of TKE?
At the end of the day, our mission statement is always about promoting education quality. We will try our best, our ability, to really make tutoring as affordable as possible to the people that needs it the most. Because a good chunk of our audience, our student base, is from populations that's been historically disenfranchised in many aspects. You can look at the numbers. You can really, it doesn't take much to realize that time and again, whenever there's a catastrophe, it's always these particular groups that always bring the blunt of the force, time and again. And COVID is no different. So the most comprehensive studies is what McKinsey Consulting did back in December. They're a consulting company, and they said essentially that on average, a African American student is a full year behind because of COVID. So they lost an entire academic year, almost the entirety of COVID since the study was done. And at the same time, versus a Caucasian student, they only lost 5 to 6 months tops. So half the amount of time. And that's just a precursor to things we see every day in the education system. This sense of inequality. So all in all, the whole point of TKE is to recognize this fundamental problem and realize how can we solve that. Be part of the solution, not part of the problem. And a big part of it is also, making tutoring or service as cheap as possible for this particular demographic and for anyone really that wants to implement our services. And number two, treat not just student but our staff well as good as well. Because let's be honest, teachers don't make nearly enough as what they should be making these days. And not just teachers, but everyone else related to TKE and staff. We want to make them a livable wage, and that's why as a base minimum, we refuse to give anyone less than $15 an hour that's associated with our organization going forward. That's a core principle that we believe in, and it's about doing good, not just saying it, but actually acting upon it as well.
Oh, then like they say, a phrase I love to use also is the rising tide raises all ships, and I believe like the core value of TKA here. Not only do we take care of people like mentally through STEM, but also throughout their life, giving some guidance, and hopefully like TKE continues to be a beacon in that aspect. And definitely for me, I can definitely feel you guys are not only just speaking about it, but taking action and actually living your words and your principles. So that again, just want to thank you guys for giving me a chance to kind of learn about TKE, kind of get a chance to highlight the members behind the TKE team, and kind of share a little bit more of our heart, and hopefully more in the future as we continue to create these little moments of kind of getting to a fireside chat or a conversation with many of us. But otherwise, yeah, I wanted to thank you guys for your time. If you guys have any last words you want to bring out or say or shout out to, feel free to go ahead.
I think you mentioned before, we have a current Patreon system. So if any one of you listeners feel like you feel particularly driven by our mission, our organization, and what we are about, feel free to hop on our Patreon link, as Michael so conveniently talked about earlier. Because at the end of the day, we try to make this as easy for the students as possible. And one of the best way you can help out the students is to officially endorse a student for free tutoring. So Patreon is a great way to do it. Essentially, you're pledging monthly support of this amount, and a student gets essentially that benefit by getting free help from your generous donation. You also receive monthly updates directly from the student and his or her tutor. So you have a direct one-on-one engagement with them, plus so much more perks and benefits. So if this seems like something your listeners will be interested in and wants to really directly involve in solving education inequality, I really personally invite them to check out that link and find out what we're really about.
Yeah, 100%. And thank you, Michael, for the opportunity to share with you and with the audience about who we are and what we're about, and any opportunities that we can get to continue to exchange knowledge. Then we want to take that. So um, we got warmed up because we were talking, I think. Are you warm? You're still cold, Jim. He's good. So he's not cold anymore. That's a good thing. So thank you so much. We appreciate it. And just shout out to all our great volunteers, our board members. Like, we appreciate all of them for their passion and drive to make TKE what it is today and what it's going to be in the future. So yeah, thanks.